It was supposed to be just another day. But when my brother Michael went into those woods, he disappeared. No trace. No sign. And to this day, I can't shake the feeling that something still watches over that place. Michael and I, we grew up here in this small town. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. But there was always something strange about those woods, something I couldn't explain. Michael, though he was different. While I was happy staying close to home, he always wanted to explore, to push boundaries. And the woods, well, they called to him. I told him time and time again, don't go too deep, Michael. There's something off about those trees. You know, people always say that memories are the things that keep us alive. But sometimes, memories can also trap you. They keep you tied to a past you can't escape. And every time I close my eyes, I'm brought back to those days. To a time when things were different. Simpler. Before everything changed. It wasn't always like this. When we were children, Michael and I, we were inseparable. You wouldn't have found one of us without the other, always side by side. Partners in crime, as we like to say. Growing up in that small town, we didn't have much, but we had everything we needed. We had each other. That was the most important thing. Our house wasn't big. It was a small two-story house, one of those old creaky ones that always smelled like wood and old paper. But it was ours. We'd run through the halls, making our own fun. Michael would always challenge me to races around the yard, daring me to keep up with him. And you know what? He was fast. Always faster than me. Always one step ahead. I remember, one summer afternoon, we sat on the porch watching the world go by. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground. Michael sat there, staring out toward the woods behind the house. I remember the way his eyes would narrow whenever he looked at those trees, like they were calling to him. I would ask him what he was thinking, and he'd just smile, that mischievous smile, and say, "You wouldn't understand." Not yet. He had this hunger in him for something bigger. Something beyond the town, beyond the fields, beyond the lives we'd known. And he always said that the woods, those ancient dark woods, held secrets. Secrets no one had ever uncovered. He was obsessed with them, and I didn't understand. I wanted to be close to him. I wanted to share his curiosity, to run with him, explore those woods. But something inside me held me back. Something about those woods made me uneasy. They weren't just trees and dirt. They were different. The way the branches twisted and stretched toward the sky. The way the shadows seemed to linger in one spot, refusing to leave even in the daylight. The feeling that something was always watching, waiting. I couldn't put my finger on it then, but as the years passed, I began to notice it more and more. Something was wrong with those woods. But Michael was fearless. He'd disappear for hours, running through the trees like they were his home. I would stand by the window, watching him go, my heart racing, wishing he would come back. But he always did. He always returned, but never without stories. Stories of hidden places, caves filled with strange markings, ancient trees that whispered in the wind. "You won't believe it," he'd say, his voice full of excitement. "I found something new today. I know the woods are hiding something. They're hiding secrets." I laughed at him, teasing him for his imagination. But deep down I knew. There was something different about him. Something special. Something that called him to those woods. Something that I couldn't understand. And then one day, he came to me, eyes wide with excitement, holding something in his hand. It was an old map, faded and torn at the edges, scribbled with markings that made no sense. He'd found it deep in the woods, hidden inside a hollow tree. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. The markings, the strange symbols, it looked ancient, like it was from another time. He told me he was going to follow the map. He was going to uncover what the woods were hiding. He said, "I'll be back by sundown. Wait for me." He didn't wait for me to respond. He was gone before I could even open my mouth. That I waited, of course. I waited like I always did, watching the sun dip lower and lower in the sky. But something was off. The shadows grew long, and the woods were still. As the hours passed, I started to feel that familiar unease creeping up my spine. I told myself it was just my imagination, that he would come back, that he was just out exploring, as he always did. But when the sun finally set, I knew something wasn't right. I went to my parents, but they just shrugged it off. "He's probably lost track of time," my father said, his voice calm as usual. "He'll be home soon." But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling in my chest. I knew Michael. He didn't lose track of time. He always came back. He always kept his promises. So why was he still gone? Why hadn't he come home? That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the trees, and the shadows seemed to stretch even longer than before. I could hear the creaking of the house, the faint whispers of the wind, and something else. Something I couldn't identify. I stood by the window, staring into the dark expanse of the woods. I knew something was out there. And then I heard it. A sound. Faint but unmistakable. Michael's voice, carried on the wind, calling my name. "Come here." It was barely audible, like a whisper carried on the breeze. My heart jumped in my chest. I didn't hesitate. I ran outside into the cold night air, my feet pounding against the earth as I rushed toward the woods. But as I reached the edge of the trees, I stopped. The wind picked up again, and the trees seemed to sway and twist around me, almost like they were alive. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. My breath was coming in shallow gasps, and my pulse was pounding in my ears. I didn't want to go any further. But Michael's voice called to me again, louder this time, urgent and pleading. I had no choice. I had to follow it. I stepped into the woods that I had no idea what I was walking into. The deeper I went, the colder it became. The trees loomed over me, their branches scratching at the air like skeletal hands. The wind howled, but it was a different kind of howl. Not the usual rush of the breeze through the leaves. It was like something, whispering. Come to me," the wind seemed to say. It wasn't Michael's voice anymore. It was something else. Something older. Darker. I don't know how far I went into the woods. Time lost all meaning. I only knew that the further I went, the more wrong it felt. The shadows seemed to move, to breathe. I could hear something following me. Something just beyond my sight. It was always there. Watching. And then I saw it. A clearing. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But when I stepped into the clearing, I knew. It was real. There, in the center of the clearing, was a stone altar, old and weathered. The air around it hummed with something. Alive. The ground was disturbed, like something had been dug up. And there, lying on the ground, was Michael's hat. That was when I knew. He wasn't coming back. I turned and ran. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the feeling that the woods were closing in around me. That I was being watched. That Michael was out there somewhere, trapped in this dark place. And that I had crossed into something I couldn't escape. I've never told anyone this. Not even my parents. But I know one thing for sure now. The woods weren't just a place. They were a presence. And that presence wanted Michael. And it wanted me too. It was only a matter of time. It was a morning just like any other. The sun was rising over the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the yard. Birds were singing in the trees, and everything seemed peaceful. Michael had gone to bed early the night before, just like I had. He was tired from his day, working on his car in the garage, trying to fix the old thing again. But that morning, he woke up before I did. I remember hearing him move around in the kitchen, the soft clinking of cups and the rustling of the newspaper. I stretched and rubbed my eyes, still groggy from a deep sleep. And as I got up to join him, I noticed something. A change. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something different about that morning. Michael was sitting by the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, staring out the window. He didn't smile like he usually did when I entered the room. Instead, there was this heaviness to him. Something in his posture made me pause. "Morning," I said, my voice soft. But he didn't respond right away. It was unlike him. Finally, he turned and looked at me. "Morning," he said, his voice distant, almost too calm. Too quiet. I walked over to him, standing beside his chair. "You okay?" I asked, my fingers lightly brushing the back of his neck, feeling the tension there. He didn't move, just stared out the window, as though he was searching for something beyond the trees. "I'm fine," he said. But I could tell. I could always tell when something was bothering him. I sat across from him, trying to meet his eyes, but he wouldn't look at me. He just stared out the window, his coffee now forgotten, growing cold. I waited. A silence hung in the air between us, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're waiting for something. Like you're waiting for a storm to hit, and you don't know when it's going to come. Or maybe it was because I could feel the storm building inside him. He finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I'm going out to the woods today. I need to follow something I found. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The woods. I'd heard the whispers again. The ones he'd been so fascinated with. The ones that spoke of things deep in the trees hidden beneath the earth. His obsession with the woods had grown in the last few weeks, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong. I had felt it for days, and now he was about to venture further into it. Farther than he had ever gone before. I leaned forward, my hand instinctively reaching for his. Michael, please don't go. You've been spending too much time out there. I'm worried. But he pulled his hand away. His eyes finally met mine, but they weren't the same. They were distant, hollow almost. I have to. I've found something. Something I need to understand. It's calling to me. I wanted to protest. I wanted to tell him not to go, to stay with me. But the look in his eyes silenced me. It wasn't the same playful glint that had always been there. There was a seriousness now. A sense of urgency. Like something inside him had changed. Promise me you'll come back by lunch, I said, my voice shaky. He gave me that smile. The one he always used when he didn't want to argue. It was a smile that said, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. I'll be back by lunch, he promised. But even as he said it, something in my chest tightened, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this time, he wouldn't keep his word. He stood up from the table, grabbing his jacket and heading toward the door. I'll be back before you know it, he said, as though trying to reassure both of us. But as he walked out of the door, I noticed something else, something that made my heart race. He didn't look back. Not even once. And that's when I knew. I knew something wasn't right. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at his jacket, before I realized what I had to do. It wasn't like before. I couldn't just sit back and wait. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. The panic inside me, it wasn't just worry anymore. It was terror. The kind of terror that digs into your bones and makes every second feel like it's a lifetime. I couldn't stand the waiting any longer. I couldn't be still. Not when Michael was out there, somewhere in those woods, alone, and I didn't know where he was or if he was even still alive. I went straight to my parents. My legs were shaking, but I had to do something. I had to try. We have to go out there. I told them, my voice barely a whisper. At first, my father didn't want to believe it. He thought I was overreacting, that Michael had just lost track of time, that maybe he'd gotten caught up in something. Don't worry, he said. He's fine, you'll see. But even as he said the words, I could see the doubt in his eyes. He knew something wasn't right. He could feel it too. I think, deep down, we all felt it. But my mother, she didn't say a word. She just nodded. She was already reaching for her coat. We didn't need to talk. She knew what had to be done. And so we went. We called for help. The neighbors, the police, everyone who could search, everyone who could do something. The search teams were assembled quickly. The whole town seemed to come alive, rallying together, as they always did in times of trouble. They all wanted to help. But I knew something they didn't. No one really understood what was out there. We gathered at the edge of the woods, looking into that thick wall of trees, trying to make sense of the impossible. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if we were going to find him, alive or not, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. My father stood beside me, saying nothing. He didn't have to. We were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't just a search anymore. This wasn't just about finding Michael. It was about surviving what else might be out there. We walked into the woods in silence. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every step I took felt heavier than the last. The trees towered over us like looming giants, their twisted limbs stretching out like fingers, trying to grab us, trying to pull us in. We called for Michael, over and over. His name echoed through the trees, but it was like the woods themselves were swallowing it up. The air felt thick, like the very ground beneath us was pulling us into the depths. I could hear the wind, but it wasn't the peaceful rustle of leaves. It was wrong. It was sharp, almost alive. "Michael!" I screamed, my voice hoarse. But still nothing. The team split up. We knew the area well enough to know where to search first. The woods stretched out for miles, but we started near the clearing where I had found his jacket. The thought of him being so close, so near, but unable to reach him, it made my stomach churn. I kept walking, my eyes scanning every inch of the ground for any clue, any sign of movement. The others were calling out too, but I couldn't help but feel like we were being watched. It wasn't just the trees, not just the wind. There was something invisible out there, something watching us, waiting. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The air grew colder. The deeper we went, the darker it got. The sunlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy of leaves above us. Shadows stretched across the forest floor, crawling along like something alive. We reached the clearing again, where Michael's jacket lay. But there was nothing else. No sign of him. I stepped forward, my mind clouded with panic. This wasn't right. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I took a deep breath and called his name again, forcing myself to stay calm, but my voice cracked. My eyes darted across the trees, hoping to see him step out, smiling that goofy smile he always gave when he was trying to ease my worries. But there was nothing. Just the silence of the forest. We searched for hours and still, nothing. My heart was in my throat the entire time. The woods were empty. It was like they had swallowed him whole. There were no traces of him, no broken branches, no footprints. Just the eerie stillness of the trees, standing like silent witnesses to something that none of us understood. We had to call in more help. By the time the sun had set, the woods felt different. The light was fading, and it wasn't just the dusk. There was something unnatural about it. The shadows were stretching out too long, and the sounds in the woods had stopped. It was too quiet. It was then that I heard something. A rustle. Far off to the left. I froze listening. It was faint, but I heard it again. The sound of leaves crunching. Not like the wind. Like someone walking. I called out to the others. They didn't hear it. They were too far ahead. I moved closer, my breath coming faster. My heart pounding so loud I thought the whole forest could hear it. I called again, but the rustling stopped. I walked further in, deeper into the woods, but the closer I got, the colder it became. The air felt heavier. The silence was overwhelming. I could hear my breath in the stillness, but I couldn't hear anything else. No birds. No animals. I walked until the trees closed in around me, and that's when I saw it. A figure. Standing in the distance. Just at the edge of the trees. I squinted, my heart leaping into my throat. Michael? But it wasn't Michael. It was a shadow, tall, thin, and unmoving. The figure didn't move when I called out to it. I couldn't even see its face, just a silhouette against the fading light. I stepped back, stumbling, my breath coming faster. But when I looked again, it was gone. Vanished into the shadows. The woods were empty once more. I stood there, trembling, trying to comprehend what I had seen. My mind was racing, but my legs felt like stone. Something was out there. Something waiting for us. I had to get back. I had to get out of there. I turned. But the shadows around me seemed darker now. The trees seemed to bend inwards, like they were trapping me in. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded. That the woods weren't just passive anymore. They were alive. And they were watching us. We made our way back, and by the time we reached the edge of the woods, it was dark. Too dark. And then we heard it. The sound of Michael's voice, carried by the wind. Not a shout. Not a cry. Just his voice, soft and far away. But it wasn't right. It wasn't the way he would have called out. It was different. As though he was speaking through the trees. His words wrapped in the shadows of the forest. Come to me. It wasn't the voice I'd been waiting for. It was a voice I didn't recognize. The forest was calling. And it wasn't done with us yet. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. Every step I took, it felt like the earth itself was pulling me deeper into the woods. The shadows grew longer. The trees seemed to loom over me like silent witnesses. I had been searching for hours, but it felt like days. My mind was racing, every creak and snap of a twig making me jump. Every breeze that rustled the leaves felt like a whisper in my ear, beckoning me to go further. I called out for Michael again, my voice cracking under the weight of my fear. But there was no response. Nothing but the wind and the silence of the trees. I could feel the panic building inside me. Was I too late? Had something already happened to him? Was I walking deeper into the woods for nothing but to find nothing? But then, just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. A sound. At first, it was faint, like the rustling of leaves. But then it grew clearer. A soft, metallic sound. A clink. My heart jumped in my chest. Was it possible? Could it be Michael's? My heart started racing. I pushed through the underbrush, my legs aching, my mind screaming to stop, but my body moved on its own. I had to find him. I had to know. The noise led me to a small clearing, barely large enough to take a step without tripping over branches and roots. My flashlight swept across the area, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a rock, or perhaps some broken piece of old equipment. But as I got closer, I realized what it was. Michael's watch. I froze. It lay there in the dirt, the faint glow of the flashlight reflecting off the metal band. It looked undisturbed, as if it had just fallen, resting there as casually as if someone had placed it there. But it couldn't be. It couldn't be that simple. I knelt down, my hands trembling uncontrollably. My fingers brushed the cold, smooth metal. It was his watch. I knew it immediately, even in the dim light. I had given it to him for his birthday a few years ago, and he'd never taken it off. I couldn't believe it. How had it ended up here? I turned the watch over in my hands, my mind reeling, trying to process the significance of what I had found. The back of the watch was slightly scratched, but the engraving was still visible. To Michael, from your sister, with love. That was it. My throat tightened. I stared at it, and I wanted to scream. This was all I had left of him. But where was he? The watch was a piece of him. It was a link to who he had been, who he was before he disappeared into the woods. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to know what happened to him. Why was the watch here? Why was this all that remained? I held the watch in my hand for a long time, just staring at it, unable to comprehend the strange calm that came over me. The rustling leaves seemed to grow louder around me, the wind growing harsher, as though the forest was urging me to leave, to stop searching. But I couldn't stop. I wasn't done yet. I couldn't explain why it felt so wrong. But it did. My fingers curled around the watch tighter. Something inside me knew this wasn't just about a missing person anymore. This was something else. This was a message. The woods weren't just hiding Michael. They had taken him. And the worst part? It felt like they were waiting for me. Watching me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. I had to understand. What was going on in these woods? What had happened to my brother? I stood up and looked around, my head spinning. The shadows of the trees seemed to lean in closer, as though the woods themselves were closing in around me. I wanted to shout for help, to call out to the others, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't let go of that watch. It felt like it was my last connection to Michael. Then it happened. The ground beneath me shifted. I stepped back, startled, and stumbled, almost falling. But when I looked down at my feet, something caught my eye. There was more. More than just the watch. The earth in this clearing, it was disturbed. Not just from the brush or the wind, but from something else. The soil was dark, and there was a faint indentation in the ground, like something, or someone had been there, pressing into the earth. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the pain in my legs. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I dug. My hands scraped against the cold, damp soil, pulling at the ground until my fingers were raw. I needed to know. I had to know if Michael was buried here. If this was all that was left of him. The soil was soft, easier to move than I had expected. I dug faster. The sounds of my labor filling the silence of the woods. The air was growing colder, the light fading with every passing second. My breath came in shallow gasps, the fear pressing against my chest like a vice. Then my hand hit something hard. My heart stopped. I pulled back the dirt, my breath coming faster, and I saw it. A piece of fabric. Torn. Michael's jacket. I pulled it free, my hands shaking as I brushed the dirt away. It was his jacket, but it was ripped, torn as though something had grabbed it, pulled it apart. I gasped, my hands trembling violently as I held it up. The jacket had been worn and weathered, but the rip was fresh. Too fresh. Like it had just happened. Like something had been there, right before I came. Why was it here? Why was it torn like this? And why hadn't anyone else found it? This wasn't right. My fingers were trembling as I held the jacket, the fabric cold against my skin. I could feel the fear growing inside me like a dark knot, tightening and suffocating me. Something had happened to Michael. The jacket wasn't just left behind. It was discarded. It was part of him, part of his life, but something had ripped it, torn it away from him. I stood there for a moment, holding his jacket, holding the watch, and I realized, this wasn't just about a missing person. This wasn't about a boy who got lost in the woods. This was something bigger, something darker. And the worst part? I was standing in it. I had walked into it. The woods had been waiting for me all along, and now it was calling me in. I heard the growl again. Louder this time. Closer. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Something that shouldn't be here. I backed away from the clearing slowly, my mind racing. I had to get out of here. I had to leave before whatever had taken Michael decided it wanted me too. But as I turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling. The feeling that the woods were moving. That the trees were reaching for me, stretching toward me with every step I took. When Michael disappeared, the town felt it. Everyone did. It was as though the very air had thickened. You could feel the tension in the streets, in the whispers between people who were once strangers, but now acted like long-lost friends. At first, they all said the same thing. He'll come back. He's just lost. He'll show up soon like he always does. But as the days turned into weeks, the hope began to fade. It wasn't just the trees that seemed to have changed. The whole town had started to feel different. People started looking at me differently too. At first, it was subtle, a glance, a quick lowering of eyes when I passed by. Then it became more noticeable. They started avoiding me. Not just me though. Everyone who had been close to Michael. It wasn't just concern anymore. It was fear. I knew what they were whispering. They were worried. Not just about Michael anymore, but about what had happened to him. And there were rumors. Those whispers, the ones that had started in the corners of town, spread like wildfire. You could hear them if you listened carefully. The way the town's elders gathered at the diner or the post office, their voices low, as if speaking too loudly might bring the thing they feared closer. One evening, after yet another long day of searching, I passed by the old diner. It was full as usual. Small-town life didn't change much. But something was off. The usual buzz of conversation had quieted, and the air was thick with nervous energy. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something, like they were all afraid to speak too loudly, as if the wrong words could awaken something they didn't want to know. I stepped in. It felt like all eyes turned to me the moment I crossed the threshold. Every face in the room seemed to freeze for a moment, staring. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was suspicion. Fear. "How's Michael?" One of the older women asked in a voice that was almost too sweet, but there was a tremor in it. She wasn't asking out of kindness. She was asking because she needed to know, because the tension in the room demanded it. "We don't know yet," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "But we're still looking." She nodded slowly, her eyes darting to the others at the table. She didn't say anything more, but the way she looked at me made it clear. They knew. They all knew what was happening. I sat at the counter, trying to ignore the murmurs that followed me. But I couldn't. I could hear every word, every whisper floating in the air, carried on the wind through the cracked window above the counter. "He's probably gone," one of the men muttered, though his voice was barely audible over the clinking of silverware. "Gone where?" I asked, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. But my hands were clenched tightly in my lap. I could feel the heat in my chest rising. "Somewhere deeper," he said, looking at me with a knowing glance. "You don't know the woods like we do." It wasn't the first time I had heard it. I'd heard it from the locals, the ones who had lived here their entire lives, who'd walked through these woods since they were children. And they weren't talking about the woods being a dangerous place. No. They were talking about something else. Something older. There are things out there. Another voice chimed in, his words hushed, like he was afraid of being overheard. Things that been there longer than we have. You don't go too deep. You never go too deep. Not unless you want to disappear like them. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because deep down, I was afraid of the same thing. Afraid of what we were all starting to realize. Michael wasn't just lost. Michael wasn't just gone. The woods had taken him. And they weren't giving him back. There were more whispers. The elderly men and women, who had seen so much of this town's history, were the ones who told the stories. The old stories. And I began to hear them in pieces. Little bits of forgotten lore, fragments of legends that didn't seem to fit anywhere in the town's history books. I heard them in the grocery store, at the library, while passing through the church. They were all talking about the same thing, the woods. And no one could say exactly why or how they knew, but they all agreed on one thing. The woods were not just a part of this town. They were something more. I remember an old man, one of the oldest in town, telling me in a voice as rough as gravel, "Those woods have taken many over the years. Long before your brother. There are things buried there, things that don't belong to this world." I asked him what he meant by that, but he just shook his head. "You don't want to know, child. Some things are best left in the dark. Some things are better left undisturbed." Everyone knew about the disappearances. They talked about them in hushed tones, never aloud. The stories had always been there, passed down from one generation to the next. But after Michael disappeared, they started coming up again. And this time, they weren't just stories anymore. They were warnings. One evening, I was sitting on the porch of the house when an old woman, one of Michael's childhood friends, came by. Her name was Sarah, and she had always been a little odd. Not in a bad way, just a little off, always watching, always waiting. She never came by much, but that evening, she knocked on the door, and when I opened it, she just stared at me for a long while. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "There are things you don't know about the woods. Things you won't understand until you see them for yourself." I invited her in, though my heart was racing. "What do you mean, Sarah? What aren't you telling me?" She didn't sit down. Instead, she stood by the door, her eyes fixed on the woods behind our house. "I've seen things," she said, voice trembling. "Things no one should ever see. The woods, they don't just take people. They keep them. They keep their souls." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked again, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked at me with pity in her eyes. "I've seen the lights," she said, as though the words were too painful to say. "I've seen the shapes in the trees, moving like they're watching. They know when you're close. They wait for the right moment to take what they want." "What do they want?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. She closed her eyes, as if preparing herself for the truth. "They want you," she whispered. "They'll take anyone who ventures too far. Anyone who looks for the truth. Michael. He wasn't the first. He won't be the last." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. I was already starting to believe it. All of it. After Sarah left, I couldn't shake what she'd said. The town's whispers had grown louder. I couldn't hear a single conversation without overhearing something about the woods, something about disappearances. The rumors spread like wildfire, and no one could stop them. Some people said the woods were cursed. Others said the trees had a spirit, a presence that lived there, that fed off the lost souls who wandered too far. The more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't just fear. It was real. The stories were real, and the woods had already begun to claim their next victim. Michael. And if I wasn't careful, I might be next. I don't know when it started, or maybe I do. Maybe it was the first night after Michael's disappearance, when I couldn't sleep, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hoping that the next time I closed my eyes, I'd wake up and everything would be normal again. But that didn't happen. The dreams came after that. Or were they dreams? I'm not sure anymore. It all started so subtly, like the kind of dream you can't quite remember when you wake up. But with each passing night, they grew more vivid, more real. And in the dark, I could no longer tell if I was dreaming or if I was awake. I'd fall asleep, And at first it was peaceful. Too peaceful. A calm that settled over me like a blanket. The kind of stillness that, in hindsight, should have made me uncomfortable. But then in that peaceful quiet, I'd hear a sound. A whisper. A soft voice calling my name. Come to me, it said. I'd open my eyes in the dream, and there, standing at the foot of my bed, would be Michael. But it wasn't Michael. Not the Michael I knew. His face was pale, too pale, and his eyes were wide and unblinking, staring at me like he didn't know who I was. Or worse, like he didn't care. I'd try to speak, try to call out to him, but no words would come. My throat felt tight, as if I couldn't breathe. The room was cold, colder than it should have been. The air felt thick, like it was suffocating me. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. Behind Michael, there were shadows moving. Not just any shadows. These were alive. They stretched across the walls, twisted and flickered like flames, crawling toward me. I could feel them reaching for me, brushing against my skin. And Michael, his eyes still vacant, stepped aside, as though allowing them to come closer. That's when I'd wake up, covered in sweat, heart pounding. But it was never just a dream. Not anymore. Every night, the dream would repeat. Michael would be there, but he wouldn't speak. He would just stare at me. And I would hear that whisper again. Come to me. A faint, eerie whisper. Come to me. Echoing in the background. The sound of soft breathing, gradually growing faster, like the sound of someone struggling to catch their breath. It was happening every night. Over and over again. Until the line between the dream and reality started to blur. I couldn't sleep without expecting to hear his voice. I couldn't go a single day without the feeling that something was out there, waiting for me. The more I tried to shake it off, the worse it got. And every night it grew darker. Every night, the shadows in the corners of my room seemed to grow longer, more alive. One night, I woke up with my heart racing. I had just had another one of those dreams. But this time it was different. I could feel something, someone watching me. The room was pitch black, but I wasn't alone. I felt it. I wasn't alone. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, frozen in place. And that's when I saw it. The shadow at the corner of my room. It was tall, dark, and for a moment I thought it was Michael. I called out to him, but my voice was a whisper, barely a sound at all. It was then that I saw it wasn't Michael. The figure in the corner didn't have a face. Just darkness. The kind of darkness that swirled around, consuming everything in its path. And it moved closer. Not toward me, but toward the window. That's when I saw the trees. Not through the window, but in the room. The trees were inside my house. Their branches stretched across the walls, their roots curling along the floor. I could feel the weight of them, like they were pressing down on me, suffocating me. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I was trapped between the dream and the waking world. The shadows were closing in on me. And then I heard it again. Michael's voice, faint but insistent. Come to me. And that's when I woke up. Again. But it wasn't just a nightmare anymore. It had become real. I couldn't tell the difference between when I was awake and when I was asleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that room, with the trees, with Michael, with the shadows. I couldn't escape. The nightmares were haunting me, draining me. I could feel my grip on reality slipping. The more I tried to fight it, the worse it got. I could feel something inside me, deep down, that told me the woods had taken him. It wasn't just a disappearance. The woods didn't just take people. They took souls. And Michael was one of them. I had to do something. I had to know. I couldn't just stay in this nightmare forever. But every night, when I closed my eyes, I felt that pull. The pull from the woods. And I started to wonder. What if I went too deep into the woods? Would they take me too? What if they wanted me to come? What if I was part of something much bigger than I could understand? The worst part? The worst part was the silence after I woke up. The quiet that followed the dream. The quiet that lasted until the next time I fell asleep. I could feel it in the air. Something was waiting for me. I couldn't escape it. Every night, I feared it would take me too. I started to lose track of time. Days blurred into one another. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The whispers filled my head. The shadows followed me. And the trees, they seemed closer than ever. I could feel them, reaching for me. And I began to hear them in my waking life too. The whisper. The voice. Come to me. I started hearing it when I was outside, standing by the window, walking through the house. It wasn't just at night anymore. The woods were calling to me, pulling me in, trying to take me just like they had taken Michael. The boundaries between the waking world and the dream world began to crumble. Something was in those woods. Something had taken him, and I knew it wasn't just the trees anymore. It was something darker. Something ancient. And the worst part? I was starting to feel like I was becoming part of it. Like I belonged to the woods now. Like there was no escaping them. Every night, I dreamed of the woods. Every night it called to me. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a roar, deafening, echoing in my mind like it had taken over every part of me. And each night, Michael was there. His face, pale and hollow, staring at me from the shadows, calling my name. Come to me. That's what he would say. But not in a way that would bring me comfort. No, it was urgent. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat, my heart racing. The cold emptiness in my chest would spread through me like ice. I knew it was real. It wasn't just a dream. I could feel it. The forest was reaching for me. It wanted me, just like it had taken Michael. And every time I woke up, I could still hear it. The whisper. Louder. Stronger. It was inside my head now, making me question everything I knew. I tried to ignore it. I tried to bury the fear. But it was always there, lurking in the background, in the corners of my thoughts. The more I fought it, the more it consumed me. The town, it had changed. The people had changed. They weren't just worried about Michael anymore. They were afraid. Afraid of what had happened to him. Afraid of what was coming next. They looked at me like I was cursed, like I had some kind of responsibility for what was happening. They didn't understand. None of them did. But I did. I had to understand. I had to know. I could feel it in my bones, in the very marrow of my being. There was something in those woods, something old, something powerful. And if I didn't confront it, if I didn't find out what happened to Michael, it would keep haunting me. It would keep calling to me, dragging me closer, deeper into its grasp. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't go on pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. I stood by that window every day, watching the trees shift in the wind, their shadows stretching, always stretching, as if they were waiting for me to make the first move. The sun would rise, but it never felt bright anymore. It felt dim, like it couldn't quite pierce the dark weight that had settled over the town. The air grew thicker, the silence louder. It was like I could hear the forest breathing, waiting. The question gnawed at me, clawing at my sanity. What if it was already too late? I tried to find answers. I went through the town's old records, searching for something, anything that might explain what was happening. I read through the town's history, through every old legend and myth. But nothing made sense. The woods had been there long before we settled here, before the town was even founded. There were no maps of the area, no clear boundaries. Just the woods. A sprawling mass of trees that no one dared to enter, except for the brave, or the foolish. I read about strange disappearances, people who had gone missing without a trace. But the stories were vague, whispers of the past. Nothing that could help me now. I tried to talk to the elders, the ones who had lived here for decades. But they didn't want to speak. They wouldn't tell me anything more than what I had already heard. Stay away from the woods. But how could I stay away? How could I ignore it when it was pulling me in? How could I ignore the fact that Michael was gone? And I was the only one left who could do something about it. The decision was made. I couldn't live in fear anymore. I had to confront it. I had to go into the woods. By the time I stepped outside, I was already walking toward the woods. The very thought of it made my chest tighten, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I knew that if I didn't find Michael, if I didn't know what had happened, I'd never find peace. The whisper, the calling, it wouldn't stop. It would follow me until I was nothing but a shadow, until I disappeared just like he did. I walked through the gate, my eyes fixed on the forest's edge, where the trees loomed like giants. The sunlight was beginning to fade, the sky tinged with orange and pink, But I didn't care. The air around me was cold. Colder than it should have been. I could feel the temperature dropping as I walked further. Closer to the dark heart of the woods. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every step I took felt like I was walking into another world. The trees closed in around me, their branches stretching toward the sky, blocking out the last of the daylight. The ground beneath my feet was soft, but not from the rain. It was almost like the earth had been waiting for me. Like it had been preparing itself for this moment, for this choice I had made. The wind picked up again, but this time it wasn't the familiar wind of the forest. This was different. It felt heavy, like the trees themselves were breathing in unison, like they were alive. The further I walked, the darker it became. The air felt thick, heavy. My breath came in shallow gasps. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. There was no turning back now. I don't know how much time passed before I found myself in the heart of the woods. It wasn't like anything I had ever imagined. It was wrong. The trees were twisted, their bark dark and gnarled, like they had grown too old, too twisted for their own good. The silence was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then I saw it. A clearing. It was small, just large enough for me to stand in. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew. I knew something had changed. The atmosphere, the air itself, everything felt alive. The wind whispered around me, the trees swayed, but they weren't swaying in the usual way. It was as if they were reaching for me, pulling me into their grasp. And then I saw something in the center of the clearing. A stone altar. Old, weathered and covered in moss, but unmistakably there. The sight of it made my blood run cold. I had heard the stories, the ones that spoke of ancient rituals, of things buried in the earth, waiting to be uncovered. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to know. I had to see it. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the stone, and the moment I touched it, I felt it. The force. The pressure. A pull that almost felt like a warning. And that's when I heard it. The voice. Come to me. It wasn't Michael's voice. It wasn't even a whisper anymore. It was a command. A call that made my knees buckle. It felt like the ground was shaking beneath me. My heart raced. My breath came faster, but I couldn't move. The voice. It was coming from the woods. From the trees. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. Nothing. Just the trees, the altar, and the eerie feeling that something had been waiting for me. I took a deep breath and made the decision. I had to confront whatever this was. I had to face it. There was no turning back. I shouldn't have come. Every part of me screamed to turn around, to leave this cursed place behind. But I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight, as though the very air was pulling me closer to something I wasn't ready to understand. I stood in that clearing, staring at the stone altar before me, and everything about it felt wrong. The way the moss covered the stone, how the earth around it seemed unnaturally disturbed, like something had recently been unearthed. And then I heard it again, the whisper. Come to me. The voice wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was louder, more insistent. And it was coming from inside the trees, from the very ground itself. I could feel the earth shift beneath my feet, a subtle tremor that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the whisper. The wind picked up, howling through the branches, but it didn't feel like the wind. It felt alive. I took a step forward. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought I could touch the altar, feel some kind of connection to whatever force had taken Michael, whatever had caused all of this. But as I reached out, I felt the pull again. Not just in the air, but in my chest, like something was drawing me in. I pulled my hand back, my heart racing, but it was too late. The moment I backed away from the altar, the ground beneath me shifted. I heard the crack of branches, the sound of something moving in the underbrush behind me. I turned around, the fear tightening in my chest, but I saw nothing. Just the trees. Just the dark, empty trees. But the whisper had grown louder, more urgent. I could hear it clearly now. Come to me. It wasn't Michael anymore. Not the voice of my brother. It was something else. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, my eyes darting around the trees. It felt like they were closing in on me. The shadows around me grew darker, longer. like the very woods were swallowing the light. I tried to call out, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat was dry. I was paralyzed with fear. The ground beneath my feet seemed to be shifting, like the woods were alive. And then I saw it. A figure. At first, it was just a shadow, flickering between the trees. But as it moved closer, I realized what it was. Michael's jacket. The same jacket I had found earlier, torn and battered, hanging from the figure's shoulders like a skin that didn't quite fit. It wasn't Michael. Not anymore. I could see the figure's face, or what had once been his face. It was pale, lifeless. Hollow eyes that stared out from under a mass of tangled, dark hair. But those eyes weren't Michael's. They were empty, dead. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight across the bones. His mouth was open in a silent scream, but no sound came out. I took a step back, my feet slipping in the dirt. The figure took another step forward. The air grew cold, impossibly cold. The trees swayed, the shadows danced, and I realized the woods were alive, and they were watching me. I couldn't move. I was frozen. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. The look in its eyes, empty, lost, dead, was enough. It was like Michael, but it wasn't him. Not anymore. This thing had been changed. Taken. The woods had claimed him. And now they were claiming me too. No. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't Michael. It couldn't be. But it looked like him. It wore his jacket. It stood like him. But there was nothing left of Michael in that thing. Nothing left but emptiness. The forest had taken him. Changed him. I turned, stumbling backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I needed to run. But where? The trees had already surrounded me. The shadows had closed in. I could feel the pull, the weight of the woods pulling at me, dragging me deeper. And I could hear the whispers again, growing louder, surrounding me. Come to me. But then a sound of voice. Not the whisper. This was a different voice. A voice I recognized. Help me. It was Michael. His voice. But it wasn't him. It wasn't the same. It was broken, muffled, like it was coming from deep underground. Like he was trapped somewhere beyond reach. I heard the desperation in his voice. Help me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was real anymore. The figure, Michael's figure, moved closer, its limbs jerking unnaturally with each step. It wasn't walking. It was being pulled by something. The ground. The forest. The thing inside the woods. I could feel it. The pull. It wasn't just the figure that was coming toward me. It was the woods. The whole forest was moving. It was coming for me, just like it had come for Michael. I had to get out of there. I had to leave. I turned and ran, stumbling through the brush, tearing at my legs, my lungs burning with every step. I could hear it behind me, the sounds of branches cracking, the whispers growing louder. Come to me. The trees seemed to move with me, blocking my way, twisting in on me, until I could barely see the path. The woods were trying to trap me. They were trying to keep me here, just like they had kept Michael. I wasn't sure how long I ran. I don't remember. It felt like I was running for hours, but when I finally stopped, when I finally turned around, the figure, Michael's figure, was gone. The woods were silent again. The trees were still. The whispers had stopped. But I knew that it wasn't over. The forest wasn't finished with me yet. It had taken Michael. And now it was waiting for me. The thing that stood in front of me wasn't Michael. It couldn't be. But it was him. It was his body, his jacket, his face. But it wasn't him anymore. The woods had taken him. And now it was waiting for me. I wasn't just searching for Michael anymore. I was searching for something much darker. Something that lived in those woods. Something that wanted us all. Something that would take anyone who dared to enter. And now, I had become part of its game. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It felt like the world was closing in around me, suffocating me with its darkness. The trees were no longer just trees. They were watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I could feel them. The forest was alive, and it had been waiting for me all along. I ran through the woods, not knowing where I was going anymore, not caring. Every step I took felt like it was pulling me deeper into the earth, as if the ground itself was trying to swallow me whole. The whispers had returned, swirling around me, growing louder, more urgent. Come to me. I stumbled, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt it. It was close. The forest wasn't just the woods anymore. It was a presence. Something alive, something that could feel me, that knew what I feared. The trees bent toward me, their branches twisting and groaning as if trying to touch me, pull me into their grasp. I turned quickly, my breath coming faster, and that's when I saw it. The clearing. The place where I had found Michael's watch. The place where everything had changed. I had to go back. I had to know. I didn't want to go back. But the whispering was too strong. I felt like it was calling to me, pulling me toward the altar. I didn't understand what it was, what was so important about this place, but I knew I had to confront it. If I didn't, the forest would never let me go. It would take me, just like it had taken Michael. I stumbled into the clearing, and it was worse than I had imagined. The altar, that stone altar, stood in the center of the clearing, covered in moss and dirt, just as it had been before. But now it wasn't just an old stone structure. It was a gateway. I felt it as soon as I stepped into the center of the clearing. The ground was warm, too warm, like the earth beneath me was alive, breathing with me, pulling me in. I could hear it again. The whisper. Come to me. But this time it was different. It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a presence pressing down on me, heavy and thick. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I looked around, desperate for something, anything, to explain what was happening. And that's when I saw it. Michael. His body. But not like before. Not like when I found his jacket or saw his face in that twisted figure. This time it was him. Michael. But his eyes were hollow. His skin was stretched pale, like a ghost, and his mouth was open in a silent scream. He was lying at the foot of the altar, and I could see that the ground had been disturbed. The earth around him was fresh, dug up as though something had dragged him here. Something that was much stronger than the earth itself. My heart dropped. I couldn't look away. The truth was staring me in the face. Michael wasn't just lost. He wasn't just gone. The woods had taken him. Changed him. This was what had been waiting for me. The altar. The place where the forest claimed its victims. It didn't just consume them. It absorbed them. Their souls. And they became part of the woods. The forest fed on them. It needed them. And now it needed me. I could feel it. The pull. The force. The whispering was louder now, surrounding me, inside my head, inside my chest. It wasn't Michael's voice anymore. It wasn't any human voice. It was something darker. Ancient. Come to me. I could hear Michael's voice too, faint and distorted. But now, I could feel the change in it. It wasn't him anymore. It was the thing the woods had turned him into. The thing that had been waiting for me all along. I had to get out of here. I had to run. But before I could move, the trees shifted. The shadows grew longer, stretching across the ground, like the forest itself was coming to life. The ground trembled beneath my feet. I looked up at the altar, and for the first time, I saw something that I hadn't noticed before. The symbol. The symbol etched into the altar. It wasn't just some decoration. It was an ancient sigil, carved deep into the stone. I didn't know what it meant, but I could feel it. I could feel its power, its curse. It was binding. It was alive. The moment I saw it, I understood. I understood everything. The woods had claimed Michael. They had taken him and changed him. His soul was lost in the forest now. And it wanted me too. It needed me to join him. To become part of the forest. To become part of the darkness that had been festering here for centuries. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just facing the loss of my brother. I was facing the end. The end of everything. The end of the town, the end of the people who had lived here. The end of me. I turned to run, but the forest wouldn't let me. The trees moved. They stretched toward me, their branches reaching out like hands, grabbing for me, pulling me back toward the altar. I screamed, but no sound came out. My feet slipped in the mud, and I fell to my knees. The earth beneath me seemed to open up, and I could feel the pull of it, the pull of the forest dragging me down. I had to get out. I had to get away from here. But I wasn't sure if it was even possible anymore. The trees, the whispers, the altar. It was all connected. It was all part of the same dark force, the same evil that had been living in the woods long before I was born. And now, it was ready to take me. I felt it. And I knew. There was no escape. Not for Michael. And not for me. This was the truth. The woods had never let go of him. And now it was taking me too. It was feeding on us. Consuming us. I tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come. The woods were too loud. Too alive.